It started one humid Tuesday morning, the kind of day where the air feels thick enough to chew, and even the birds are too tired to sing. I had just stepped out onto my porch with a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee, still wearing the t-shirt I'd slept in, when a patrol car rolled up to the curb outside my house. The red and blue lights weren't flashing, but that didn't stop my stomach from tightening. I live in a quiet cul-de-sac at the edge of a mid-sized town in Florida, not exactly the type of place where cops just drop by for fun. The officer got out of the car, tall guy, maybe late 40s, eyes squinting behind dark sunglasses like he was trying to size me up before saying anything. He asked me, politely but firmly, if I had been aware of the ongoing violations related to the homeowners association in my neighborhood. I blinked at him, confused because as far as I knew, I wasn't in any homeowners association. My house is technically just outside the Willow Lake subdivision. Same zip code, but no gate, no board, no dues, and definitely no community pool I could sneak into. I told him as much and he nodded slowly, then handed me a printed notice anyway, said something vague about routine enforcement, and got back in his car. I stood there, barefoot on the concrete porch, coffee in hand, watching him drive away as if this were just some casual, normal Tuesday occurrence. It wasn't. Over the next few weeks, it kept happening. Sometimes it was a different officer, young, nervous, apologetic. Other times it was the same guy who seemed less polite with each visit. They'd always show up with another notice, an uncut lawn warning, a complaint about unauthorized exterior paint color, or a citation for failure to remove holiday decorations in a timely manner. I hadn't put up Christmas lights in years, but that didn't stop them. I tried calling the Willow Lakes HOA office, but the number listed on the notices always sent me to a generic voicemail box that no one ever returned. When I emailed them, I got an auto-response thanking me for my continued commitment to neighborhood standards. By the third week, I started getting nervous. One morning I woke up to find a bright orange warning sticker plastered across my garage door. My neighbors began to notice. Old Mrs. Langley from across the street started giving me the stink eye, muttering something about bad apples in the neighborhood. One guy even told me half-jokingly that I'd better get right with the board. What board? I didn't belong to their board. I didn't even live in their district. My property tax records were clear, and I'd never signed any HOA documents. I'd chosen this house specifically to avoid that kind of nonsense. But logic didn't seem to matter. The letters kept coming more aggressive each time. Some weren't even about me. I got fined for exceeding the maximum number of pet units per household, whatever that means. I have one cat. I don't even think she counts as a unit. The whole thing was surreal, like some Kafkaesque neighborhood nightmare where no amount of explanation could save me from bureaucracy's unblinking eye. I started keeping a file. I printed out every notice, took time-stamped photos of my yard, my paint, even my trash cans. I filed a police report, not because I thought it would help, but because I wanted a paper trail. When I told the desk officer what was happening, she looked at me like I was making it up. Why would they send cops? She asked. HOAs don't have that kind of authority. Exactly. That's what I thought too. But someone had convinced the local police that my property was under their jurisdiction. And each time they came, they brought the weight of real authority with them. Not guns drawn, but close enough to make me uneasy. I didn't know who was behind it. Was it a mistake? A neighbor with a grudge? An overzealous HOA board with faulty maps? Every day it felt a little more invasive. They weren't just pestering me, they were encroaching. I couldn't even enjoy my morning coffee without wondering if a patrol car would creep around the corner. The kicker came when I received a certified letter, this time threatening legal action. Not just a fine, but potential lien placement in accordance with community bylaws. That's when I snapped. Because I don't have any bylaws. I don't have a board. I don't have anything to do with Willow Lakes. And yet, they kept coming. I realized I needed answers, real ones. Enough was enough. I couldn't keep dodging patrol cars or explaining to my increasingly concerned neighbors why law enforcement kept showing up at my house with warnings about trash bins and lawn heights. It felt like I was slipping into a reality that didn't belong to me. So I cleared a full day, gathered every piece of mail, every printout, every emailed citation, and every photograph I'd taken, and drove to the address listed at the bottom of the most recent HOA letter. It led me to a dull beige building in one of those generic strip malls on the edge of town. The kind where every door looks the same and the most exciting thing around is a now-open frozen yogurt shop beside a half-lit dry cleaner. The glass door read Willow Lakes Community Management, visitors by appointment only, but it wasn't locked. I stepped in anyway, my file folder tucked under my arm and my patience hanging by a single thread. Inside, the place was quiet, chilled by industrial-strength air conditioning, with a faint chemical scent like recently vacuumed carpet and air freshener trying a little too hard. A young woman sat behind a laminate desk, clicking through spreadsheets on a monitor. She looked up, surprised, clearly not used to unexpected visitors. "Can I help you?" she asked, the kind of tone reserved for people who are probably lost. I introduced myself, gave my address, and explained as calmly as I could that I had been receiving increasingly aggressive HOA enforcement letters and even visits from local police, despite the fact that my house was not part of Willow Lakes or any homeowners association at all. Her expression shifted from confusion to polite skepticism, and she asked if she could check the system. I handed over my file of documents. She blinked at its thickness, then began typing my address into her computer. A silence followed. It stretched long enough that I glanced at the cheap wall clock behind her just to make sure time was still working. Finally she looked back up. "That's odd," she said slowly, tapping her keyboard again. "According to our records, your property is listed as part of Phase 4. I frowned. There is no Phase 4. Willow Lakes only has 3 phases. My neighborhood isn't even adjacent to Phase 3. It's across the road, different entrance, separate developer. I did my research before buying. I didn't want to be in an HOA. She nodded, biting her lip. You're correct that Phase 4 doesn't currently exist. It was part of a proposed expansion plan submitted 2 years ago. The application went through several stages of approval, but the actual development was shelved. No homes were built. But, she glanced back at her screen, somehow your address got included in the preliminary lot survey. It looks like it was added to our internal system back then, and no one ever removed it. I felt the air leave my lungs. So, you're telling me I was accidentally drafted into a ghost subdivision that was never built? She nodded reluctantly. In so many words, yes. The system thinks you're under our jurisdiction. Even though you're not, technically. At least not legally. Legally, I repeated, the word echoing in my head. That didn't stop the cops from showing up. It didn't stop the fines, the warnings, the sticker on my garage. So what does the legal side say? She glanced at a paper beside her keyboard, then back at me. Well, it depends. We'd have to escalate this to our legal department. They handle disputes like this. But just so you're aware, they're a bit slow. I exhaled sharply, trying not to raise my voice. Look, I don't think you understand. This isn't just a paperwork error anymore. You've got people coming to my house. You've got police being dispatched because your system thinks I didn't put my recycling bins back fast enough. This isn't theoretical. This is harassment. She winced. I agree with you. And I'm sorry. But I'm just the front desk. I can't change the database myself. All I can do is flag your address for review and send it up the chain. How long does that take? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she printed out a form and slid it across the counter to me with a pen. You'll need to fill this out, she said. Dispute of HOA membership status. The title alone made me want to laugh. Dispute of membership in a neighborhood I never joined, for rules I never agreed to, enforced by people who didn't even seem to know where the neighborhood actually ended. I took the pen, my hands tighter than I realized, and began writing. I couldn't believe this was real. My house, my sanctuary, was being pulled into some phantom version of reality, one created by a glitch in a spreadsheet and held together by indifference. As I signed the bottom of the form, I asked the woman one more question. Has anyone else come in with the same problem? She hesitated. Not officially, she said. But, there have been some weird complaints lately. Other properties on the edge of town. Things that don't quite make sense. That chilled me more than anything else. I left the office with a sinking feeling in my chest and a carbon copy of the dispute form tucked under my arm like a sad souvenir. The parking lot was shimmering under the midday sun, and everything around me felt too still, like the town had paused while I tried to unravel its errors. I sat in my car for a long time with the engine running, just staring at the traffic passing by on the main road. The idea that there were other properties, other people, being targeted the same way I was left me uneasy. I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or worse. On one hand, I wasn't crazy. On the other, this was no longer a personal annoyance. It was a pattern. A quiet, invisible mess being swept under the bureaucratic rug. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside my window set me on edge. My cat, Cleo, curled up on the windowsill, tail twitching every time a car passed. I kept getting flashes of those blue uniforms, of warning stickers slapped on innocent walls, of my neighbor looking at me like I was the local delinquent. I got up at 3 a.m., opened my laptop and started digging. First into the HOA's website, which was mostly bland, full of sunshine stock photos and vague mission statements about protecting community aesthetics. Nothing about Phase 4. Nothing about boundary maps. But then I started searching property forums, Facebook neighborhood groups, Reddit threads. It didn't take long to find them, posts from people across town describing the same thing I was going through. Some were subtle. Anyone else getting letters from an HOA they're not part of? Others were frantic. Police just showed up to issue a noise complaint and said it came from Willow Lakes. I lived 10 miles away. I found one post that stopped me cold. A user named Miss Shadows 87 had written, 3 weeks ago, got slapped with a fine for non-compliant mailbox design. Never signed an HOA agreement. Records say I'm in Phase 5? What is Phase 5? Phase 5. Not 4. 5. But there was no Phase 5 on any public document. That didn't make sense. Unless more phases were being added to some internal system, invisible to the outside world, but real enough to justify enforcement. Or at least to pretend to. I messaged her immediately. She didn't respond right away. Maybe she never would. But just knowing someone else had used the same words I had, ghost phases, false jurisdiction, it was like the first thread pulling free from a much bigger web. The next morning I decided to knock on some doors. My street wasn't long, but I realized I barely knew any of my neighbors. Most were polite but confused. A few had gotten warning letters but shrugged them off as junk mail. Some hadn't received anything, which only made the targeting seem more deliberate. But when I reached the far end of the block, a man in his 70s opened the door before I even knocked. "You finally coming to fix this?" he barked. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He narrowed his eyes at me, then at the clipboard in my hand. "You're not with the board?" I told him no. Told him I was trying to figure out why I was being harassed by a board I wasn't part of. He grunted and stepped outside, lowering his voice. "They got to me last year," he said. "Started small. Trash bins. Then grass height. Said I owed $400 in back dues. I laughed at first. Laughed in their faces. Then they started sending cops. Real ones. Not the board's hired security. I tried fighting it. Showed them my deed, tax records. Didn't matter. They said the system had changed. I felt my skin crawl. "Did you get it fixed?" He looked past me toward the end of the street. "Eventually. But not because of them. I found a lawyer who threatened to sue the board. Even then it took months. They never apologized. Just stopped sending the letters like it never happened." As I walked back to my house, a sick thought formed in my mind. What if this was the new system? A digital expansion of power, spreading like a virus through outdated records and automated enforcement, quietly pulling homes into compliance with rules they never agreed to. A network of invisible borders and fake subdivisions, maintained not by oversight but by indifference. No one noticed. No one cared. Not until it was them. And by then it was already too late. The notices had begun. The files had been built. The patrol cars were already on their way. A few days later, a letter arrived that changed everything. Not an email, not a warning taped to my garage, but an actual letter. Embossed, thick paper, no return address. Just my name, typed with that weird spacing that government agencies and funeral homes tend to use. Inside was a single page with one sentence printed in bold, all caps. "Your file has been escalated to Compliance Enforcement Phase 2. That was it. No signature, no explanation. Just that single, cold sentence. It felt like a threat, but wrapped in formal language sterile enough to avoid legal liability. I read it 3 times. My heart raced like I'd just run a mile. I didn't know what Phase 2 meant, but I knew it wasn't good. I wasn't even done dealing with Phase 1. I set the letter on the kitchen table and just stared at it. Cleo jumped up beside me and knocked it over with her paw like she could sense the unease radiating from it. I picked it up again and checked every corner, even held it to the light. No watermark, no hidden signature. Just that one sentence. That night I started hearing noises. Soft ones at first, clicks like metal tapping against glass. Then scratching. Not loud enough to be alarming, but constant enough to feel intentional. I walked the perimeter of the house with a flashlight, checked the windows, the back fence, the shrubs. Nothing. No animals. No branches. But the sound would return again just before sunrise, like it was waiting until the darkest part of the night. By the end of the week, I found a motion sensor camera online and installed it at the front of the house. I needed to know who or what was lurking near my property. The next morning I checked the footage. There was nothing at first. Just wind, a few passing cars, one of the neighborhood cats slinking across the sidewalk. But then at 3:41 a.m., someone walked past the edge of the frame. Just barely visible. A figure in a dark hoodie, walking slowly along the sidewalk, then pausing, turning, looking directly at the camera. The streetlight only caught half of their face. It wasn't anyone I recognized. They didn't approach the door or vandalize anything. They just stared for about 10 seconds, then turned and walked out of frame. The timestamp felt burned into my brain, 3:41 a.m. The exact moment I'd heard the metal tapping again. I downloaded the footage, saved it to 3 separate drives. I even uploaded a copy to a cloud account just in case something happened. That day I went back to the HOA office. But the door was locked. This time really locked. The visitors by appointment only sign had been replaced with one that said, "Office closed for internal audit." No walk-ins. I knocked anyway. No answer. I peered through the blinds and saw the same front desk, empty. Same smell of toner and cheap air freshener. But the place looked stripped. Like they'd packed in a hurry. The woman who had helped me before was nowhere to be seen. There wasn't even a receptionist schedule taped to the wall anymore. It was like the building had been evacuated under some silent emergency. I called the number listed on the website. This time it didn't go to voicemail. It just rang endlessly until a mechanical voice said, "This number is no longer in service." Every lead I'd been following had vanished overnight. My file, my complaint, even the dispute form, all of it had slipped into some administrative black hole. The next day, a city inspector showed up at my house. No warning. No call. Just rang the doorbell while I was halfway through lunch and introduced himself with a badge that looked like it had been printed on a home laminator. "Property audit," he said. "Routine compliance inspection. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. I asked if this was from the city or from the HOA. He just smiled, said, "It's all the same now," and started walking around my yard with a clipboard. That was the moment it clicked for me. Whatever this was, it was no longer just a clerical error. It had grown into something worse. Something that blended just enough legality with just enough confusion to be untouchable. I followed the inspector around, asking questions he never answered. He wrote things down without measuring anything. He took photos of my shed, my fence, even the small cracks in my driveway that had been there for years. When he finally left, he said only one thing: "You'll receive a status update in the mail. Don't delay." And then he walked off like a man who'd done this 1,000 times. I stood in my driveway long after he left, clutching my coffee mug with both hands, watching the road for the next visitor. Because by now I knew they were coming. The status update came 3 days later in an envelope identical to the last one, heavy stock, no return address, perfectly typed. But this time there were 3 pages. The first was a list of infractions allegedly committed over the past 60 days, non-regulation fence height, unauthorized tree placement, and the one that truly broke me, failure to respond to compliance auditor visit with appropriate deference. I had no idea what that even meant. What did appropriate deference look like? A handshake? A salute? A thank you basket? The second page was a threat, this time more direct. Continued non-compliance will result in enforcement escalation, per Charter Code 4D7, Neighborhood Integrity Tier 2. Still no explanation of what that meant. No way to respond. The third page was a grainy black and white photo of my house, taken from the street, time-stamped at 2:14 a.m. I hadn't noticed it being taken. It wasn't from my camera. Whoever took it had done so quietly. Professionally. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't going to stop on its own. I tried logic. I tried filing complaints, asking questions, documenting everything. But this was beyond that now. I was trapped in a paperless war, targeted by a system with no face, no front desk, no living voice willing to admit fault. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged back into the old message board for the county, one of those ugly old web forums that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2009. Buried inside a thread labeled HOA Enforcement Abuse, please read before deleting, I found a post by a user named Archivist42, dated just 4 months prior. The title read, "If you're getting letters from Willow Lakes HOA and you don't live there, contact me immediately." The post itself was short. This isn't a mistake. It's part of something bigger. I worked for the municipal GIS office for 10 years. I can prove they've been altering property overlays on purpose. I messaged him instantly. To my surprise, he replied the same day. "You're not the only one," he wrote. "This happened before in 2016. But the neighborhood was smaller then. Easier to keep quiet. You live near the expansion zone, right?" That phrase chilled me, expansion zone. I'd never heard it before, but it explained everything. I asked him to call me. He refused. Said the last time he spoke to someone by phone about this, Their complaint file vanished from the city's public records database within 48 hours. Instead, he sent me documents. Screenshots of internal city maps, overlays showing how my property, and dozens of others, had been labeled for future HOA integration. One slide in particular stood out. It was dated March 2023, and in red font at the bottom it read, Phase 4+5 integration assumed. Enforcement prep may proceed without formal annexation. In short, they didn't wait for the paperwork. They just moved in. I wanted to vomit. I asked him why no one was doing anything. Why the police were showing up at my house, why letters kept arriving, why people were afraid to speak up. He responded with one sentence, because they think it's normal. That hit me harder than I expected. He was right. When the letters came, I didn't scream. When the police knocked, I didn't resist. I tried to comply, because that's what we're taught to do. Because fighting it seems worse. Because systems like these are designed not to break you quickly but slowly. With each piece of paper. With every quiet knock in the night. They make you feel like it's easier to give in than to resist. But I wasn't ready to give in. I asked Archivist 42 if I could meet him. He gave me an address, an old public library 20 minutes outside town. Said to come in the morning. Too risky at night, he typed. They monitor everything near the phase lines after dark. That sounded paranoid, sure. But after everything I'd seen, I wasn't about to argue. I printed the documents he sent me, packed every letter I'd received, and prepared to drive out there first thing. That night I got no sleep. I kept watching the motion camera feed on my phone. At exactly 3:41 a.m. the figure came back. Only this time they didn't just stare. They walked halfway up my driveway, stood still for nearly a minute, then turned and walked back into the street. No vandalism. No message. Just a silent reminder, we're still watching. The next morning I left for the library before the sun rose. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. The library was almost empty when I arrived. A few scattered cars in the lot, morning light just beginning to pour across the cracked pavement. I parked far from the entrance, instinctively scanning the area before stepping out of my car with the folder tucked under one arm. My breath fogged briefly in the cooler air-conditioned entryway as I pushed open the glass doors. The building had that musty smell of forgotten knowledge, paper, dust, and silence. A woman behind the desk gave me a glance, then returned to her paperback. I looked around, trying not to look like someone who'd come to learn about a shadow war no one was supposed to know about. Archivist 42 had told me to head to the second floor, far back corner, local archives section. It was a quiet part of the library where the lights flickered slightly and no one went unless they were researching a genealogy project or trying to avoid the world. As I turned the corner, I saw a man already waiting there, late 40s, maybe 50s, worn jeans, denim jacket, laptop bag beside him on the table. His eyes flicked up at me as I approached. "You're the house on Sycamore Lane," he said. Not a question. I nodded, setting down my folder. "Your archivist?" "Was," he replied. "Name's Dean." He didn't offer a handshake and I didn't push for one. He slid his laptop open and turned the screen toward me. "This isn't new," he said. "It started as an efficiency project. The city wanted more streamlined ways to integrate new developments with existing infrastructure. Utilities, enforcement, services. Nothing sinister. But then the HOAs got involved. They saw a chance to expand. Quietly. They called it anticipatory jurisdiction. A trial concept. Map a property as future managed before it's officially signed over. Then enforce as if it's already under control. "That's illegal," I said. Dean gave a tired half-smile. "You'd think that. But most homeowners don't challenge it. The letters look official. The cops show up. People fold. A few complaints trickle in, but the city claims it's a database issue. Says they'll fix it. And they never do." He clicked through a series of folders, screenshots, scanned documents, internal memos from municipal databases. He had names, parcel IDs, zoning overlays. My address was in there, highlighted. It had been flagged over a year ago. Target for pre-enforcement initiative. Another file showed police dispatch records that corresponded with the days officers came to my house. Each was logged under community compliance request, with a project code beside it. WLX204A. WLX, I said. Willow Lakes expansion? He nodded. Phase 4. Phase 5. There's already a 6 planned on paper. But none of those exist yet. The land isn't annexed. No infrastructure. But the enforcement arm, well, it's been activated for months. They're building the illusion first. Make the enforcement feel normal so the paperwork catches up to reality. I sat back feeling hollow. So I'm living in a fiction enforced by real people. That's one way to put it, he said. You're not the only one. There are at least 50 households flagged like yours. They just haven't all been pushed yet. You were early. Why me? He hesitated. Because you're close to phase 3. That's where the digital fence starts. The algorithm they're using to scrape property records isn't perfect. It pulled in everyone within a certain radius. You got unlucky. I opened my folder, spread the letters across the table. He scanned them briefly. Yeah. That's standard escalation language. First notices. Then penalties. Then compliance warnings. Then you get a visit. He tapped the photo I'd received. And if you keep resisting, they'll refer you to Tier 3. His voice went lower. That's when the liens start. I rubbed my temples. How do I stop this? He closed the laptop slowly. Legally? You can't. Not easily. The system is designed to make appeals feel like sandbags in a hurricane. You can hire a lawyer, spend months, maybe years to get removed from their records. But by then, most people have already paid out of frustration or fear. Or they've sold the house and moved. I'm not moving. Then document everything. Start an independent record. Keep physical copies, off-site backups. File complaints directly with the city zoning department, not the HOA. Force the split. Make them acknowledge the discrepancy publicly. And find others like you. Strength is in numbers. If you go at this alone, they'll bury you in paperwork until you fold. He handed me a flash drive. This has everything I showed you. Use it if you want. But be smart. Once you start pushing back, they'll notice. And they'll push harder. I slipped the drive into my pocket, heart thudding. Thanks, I said. He gave a small nod. Just don't wait too long. The closer you get to phase 6, the harder it'll be to prove you don't belong. I left the library with a single thought looping in my mind. They weren't waiting for people to join. They were absorbing us. I spent the rest of that day in a haze of dread and adrenaline. I went straight home, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The walls seemed thinner. The silence seemed staged. I double-checked every window, locked every door, pulled the blinds shut even though the sun was still up. I felt watched. Not by people exactly, but by the system. I kept thinking about what Dean had said: anticipatory jurisdiction, digital fences, enforcement without consent. It sounded insane. But I had the evidence now: raw files, maps, codes, internal memos. It was real. And it was spreading. I couldn't just sit here waiting for another visit. So I made a decision. If they were going to keep treating me like I was part of their HOA, then I was going to treat this like war. The first step was exposure. I created a separate email, an anonymous blog, and posted everything I had, redacted for safety. I called it the Ghost Phases. I uploaded the letters, the pictures of the enforcement notes, Dean's zoning documents, and the 3:41 a.m. footage of the figure who kept appearing at the edge of my property. I kept the blog plain. No fancy graphics, no tags. Just the facts. I posted links on every community forum I could find, especially the ones where I'd seen people like Miss Shadows 87 posting weeks ago. Within 2 hours I had my first comment. Then another. Then a dozen. People started reaching out. Quietly. Some via the blog's contact form, others through burner emails. One woman from across the county said her water bills had started being routed through a Willow Lakes utility subdistrict, even though her home wasn't even on the same grid. A guy 3 blocks from me said he'd received a citation for exterior foliage disruption, which turned out to mean his dog knocked over a flower pot. And it wasn't just Willow Lakes anymore. There were whispers of similar phantom enforcement creeping out of developments like Pinecrest Haven, Weststone Heights, and something called Meadowglass Vista, which, as far as anyone could tell, didn't exist at all outside of digital blueprints and billing codes. The more I posted, the more I realized this wasn't isolated. These HOA expansions weren't waiting for city approval or homeowner consent. They were operating like viruses, duplicating, mapping, simulating control until actual control became inevitable. People weren't living in neighborhoods anymore. They were living in pre-models, digitally annexed future zones where the rules were already written and the enforcement already deployed. I started hearing from people with more technical knowledge than me: ex-developers, city clerks, legal interns. One sent me a buried PDF from a city council meeting 5 years ago. A proposal for unified civic enforcement systems, in partnership with third-party management companies and municipal software providers. It included language like pre-authorized compliance procedures and soft jurisdiction modeling. Another person found records showing that Willow Lakes Community Management had received a substantial grant for urban outreach enforcement pilot programs. That same night, my motion camera sent me another alert. I opened the feed, expecting the same eerie figure at 3:41 a.m. But this time there were 3 of them. No visible faces. No aggression. Just standing. One in the driveway. One in the yard. One directly in front of my mailbox. For 30 seconds they stood in perfect silence, then turned and walked away in different directions. I saved the footage, uploaded it to the blog and turned off the lights in my house, locking myself in the basement with my laptop and Cleo pressed tight against my leg. I didn't know what they were trying to say. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. By the following morning, the ghost phases had over 4,000 views. Then 12,000. Then 30,000. I wasn't trending, not exactly, but I was being read. Sure. Talked about. Some people accused me of making it all up. Others called it urban legend bait. But enough people believed me to keep the pressure building. Someone even tagged a local journalist who had previously written about zoning corruption. She messaged me, "Do you have proof this isn't just aggressive HOA behavior?" I sent her everything. She didn't reply right away, but I saw that she downloaded the files. Then I didn't hear from her again. That's when I noticed the van. It was parked across the street the next evening. Plain white. No decals. Just sat there, engine off, windows dark. It didn't move all night. When I woke up the next morning it was still there. The same day my Wi-Fi started dropping in odd patterns. My phone froze during a call to the zoning office. Emails from the blog began bouncing back with undeliverable errors, even though they'd gone through the day before. The line between paranoia and reality started to blur. But I wasn't backing down. I printed everything. Made hard copies. Stored backups offsite. I even buried a USB drive in my backyard, labeled it with a Sharpie, "Not crazy," because I had a feeling things were about to get worse. It happened the next Tuesday morning, exactly 4 weeks from the first police visit. I woke up to pounding on the door, not knocking, pounding, heavy and insistent like they already had a reason to break it in. Cleo bolted under the couch. I looked through the peephole and there they were again, 2 uniformed officers different from the ones before. Behind them stood a man in a slate gray suit holding a clipboard and a folded document in a manila envelope. The lead officer raised his fist to knock again. I opened the door before he could. "Mr. Hammond?" the suited man asked. I nodded. "This is an official notice of legal escalation," he said and handed me the envelope. "Due to repeated violations and failure to comply with directives from the Willow Lakes Compliance Board, your property has been referred for municipal intervention." He said it like it was a formality, like it wasn't insane, like it made sense. I stared at the document inside the envelope. It was a legal filing. A motion to place a lien on my property. Not from the city. From them. The HOA I didn't belong to. "This isn't real," I said. "I don't live in Willow Lakes. This house isn't under your board. I have proof. I have records. I filed a dispute." The suited man gave a tight, practiced smile. "We're aware of your blog," he said. That stopped me cold. "It's been flagged for dissemination of misinformation. Misrepresentation of administrative procedure. Your activities have drawn unnecessary public attention to internal zoning matters that are still under review." "Under review?" I repeated. "So you admit none of this is final?" The officer beside him shifted his weight. "Sir, we're not here to argue the law. We're just here to deliver the notice. You have 72 hours to respond to the filing in county court. If not, enforcement procedures will proceed as outlined in the municipal code." I didn't know what to say. Not because I lacked the words, because none of them would have mattered. The system wasn't broken. It was operating exactly as designed. Just not the way anyone outside it understood. When they left, I closed the door and leaned against it, the envelope clutched in my hand like it was radioactive. My phone buzzed, an email from the journalist I'd spoken to the week before. "Need to talk. Call me immediately." I did. She picked up on the first ring. "They showed up at my house," she said, voice shaking. 3 men. No badges, no ID. Said I'd been provided with sensitive misclassified material, and that I needed to delete any records from your name. They knew my address. My parents' address. Even the school my kid goes to. She paused. "What the hell is going on?" "They're real," I said. "They're not just harassing me. They're expanding, digitally, legally, structurally. Before anything gets approved. They're acting like the annexations already happened." I sent her Dean's files, the camera footage, the legal filing. Everything. She went quiet for a moment. Then, "Okay. I'm going public." The article went up that night. Phantom HOAs, The silent expansion of control in suburban America. She didn't name me. Didn't need to. She listed 5 cases like mine, all within the same county. All linked to Willow Lakes or one of its future phase partners. She quoted zoning experts, legal analysts, civil rights advocates. She raised the alarm without sounding alarmist. It wasn't a conspiracy theory, it was policy gone rogue. And it spread fast. Local news picked it up. Then regional. Then national media began sniffing at the edges, poking into real estate networks, HOA boards, city planning committees. Someone even called it the cartography coup, a quiet war for territory fought with digital lines, automated notices, and a slow creep of authority that looked legal until you asked questions. And no one ever did. For the first time I felt like I wasn't crazy. I felt seen. Not safe but seen. That feeling lasted about 48 hours. On Thursday morning someone threw a rock through my front window. No note. No message. Just shattered glass and a long silence afterward. Then came the anonymous texts. You should have stopped when we knocked. You live where we say you live. Maps don't make mistakes. People do. My site was taken offline 2 days later. Hosting account canceled. Email disabled. My domain flagged 4 terms of service violations. When I called customer support, I got transferred 3 times before someone told me, off the record, that they'd received an unusually formal takedown request from a non-governmental agency that looked official enough. I reached out to Dean. No response. His last blog post had been deleted. His backup account went dark. I sat alone in my living room, broken window boarded up, police report filed and ignored, and realized, this wasn't just enforcement anymore. This was containment. They weren't stopping me from speaking. They were erasing the conversation before anyone could hear it. I wasn't a person to them. I was a mistake in their model, a line drawn slightly off-center. And now the model was correcting itself. The thing about being erased is that it doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic shutdown, no midnight arrest. It's subtler. First, your mail starts arriving late, or not at all. Then your name disappears from the city's property search tool. Your voter registration shows pending address verification. Your trash doesn't get picked up. You stop getting jury duty notices, but your neighbors don't. People stop waving. Cars slow down when passing your driveway. The silence around you deepens not because you're alone, but because you've become administratively invisible. And once you're invisible, what happens to you doesn't matter. I'm still here. The house is still mine, on paper. No one's taken it yet, though I've gotten 3 letters from neutral real estate brokers, asking if I'd like to transition out of a high-pressure district. That's how they say it now. They don't threaten you. They suggest that it might be easier for everyone, if you moved. If you let go. If you stopped complicating integration protocols. The journalist's article stirred things up, but it didn't ignite revolution. A few more came forward. 1 or 2 lawsuits were filed. A local zoning official resigned quietly. Then everything went quiet again. A cloud of legal fog settled over the entire thing. No names named. No terms explained. Just the vague hum of ongoing review. The city issued a statement acknowledging community confusion and promised to re-evaluate future phase partnerships. But the enforcement never stopped. The visits became less official, more random. Fewer uniforms, more unmarked vehicles. Drones now, sometimes. No buzzing sound. Just shadows passing over the yard and disappearing again. Cleo's gone. She ran out during the second window break. I found her collar by the fence the next morning, but no tracks. Not even a print in the dirt. I still leave food out though. She was the last piece of normal I had. The neighbors don't talk to me anymore. Not the new ones, not the old ones. A few of the longtime residents quietly sold and left. Some, I think, didn't even sell, they just vanished. Like the guy 3 houses down who always wore a Marine Corps hat. One day he was gone. House emptied, relist, staged for an open house within a week. I tried to find records, but the digital trail ended mid-transfer. When I called the listing agent, they said the home was part of the Willow Lakes Unified Phase boundary. That phrase again. Like a curse you weren't supposed to know how to pronounce. And still they send the cops. Not every week. Not always the same ones. Sometimes it's just a drive-by. Other times they knock and pretend they don't know me like it's the first time. I've started filming everything again. I've rigged up a dozen hidden cams around the house, motion-triggered, backed up to encrypted drives. Every knock, every slow cruise past the house, every compliance audit they try to force, I capture it. I've built another blog offline this time. Handwritten archives. Copies of copies of copies. I mail them to friends out of state. I store USB drives in hardware stores in safety deposit boxes under fake names. I won't disappear quietly. That's the truth of it now. They can harass me, erase me from maps, break my windows and send men in suits to read threats off scripts. But I'm still here. They want the silence, the simulation, the illusion of total control. But I've broken that illusion and they know it. Every time I answer the door and film their confusion. Every time I challenge a letter. Every time I post a flyer on a street pole that says, "You are not in their boundaries yet," I force them to see the fracture in their machine. Dean's files are still safe. I've triplicate them. I don't know where he is or if he even made it out. But I know what he believed, that the only way to fight this isn't with lawyers or protests or petitions. It's with evidence, exposure, persistence. You don't unplug a system like this all at once. You take it down one piece at a time. One false notice. One legal contradiction. One unmapped address that refuses to fold. The house has become a monument to resistance now. My grass is overgrown. I painted the curb number black. I built a steel mailbox and poured concrete around the base. I don't care about citations anymore. They've already labeled me a hostile participant. The next step will be either total erasure or something more permanent. But until then I'll stay here. Because this is my home. Not Willow Lakes. Not Phase 6. Mine. And if they want it, they'll have to come and take it. On record. In daylight. Where everyone can see.